Hello people, you can call me Gibby, and today I'll share with you guys the basics of watercolor. You may be wondering, what is watercolor? Well, it's a type of art medium. You see, there's acrylic paints, there's oil paints, wash, and then there's watercolor. It's water-soluble, meaning that the paint will dissolve when you add water into it, allowing the pigments, which is the colored material, to spread with the brush. And I'm still learning, obviously, so if there's any lack of information or anything I've said that is wrong, I'm very sorry and please let me know. I'm super excited. There's a whole list of things that's waiting to be read. Let's get started! Usually, watercolor paints come in pans. Oh, it's upside down. Pans are tubes. Let's talk about the tubes first. They usually come in sets of 12, 24, or even more. To use them, squeeze the amount you need on a palette, dilute them with some water, and you're good to go. If you leave them like that, you can always reactivate it later in the future with water, and it'll still be available to use, although some may lose its quality. The cons for tubes are that sometimes they're so hard to open, and you might not know how much paint you need, so you might have to pause midway in painting, squeeze more paint out. But the pros are, you can actually use them straight out of the tube without adding water if you want a really intense color. And it's ideal for painting large areas because you can squeeze out as many paint as you want. Pans are sometimes called paint cakes, not pancakes, paint cakes. They come in cases like this, like an eyeshadow palette. Same with tubes. To use them, you have to activate it with water by either spraying or dumping water with a brush. In my personal opinion, pans are more efficient because you don't have to squeeze them, it's already there for you to use. And it's long lasting because only the paint you use will be used, so no paint wasted, if that makes sense. And you know what, this is my first paint set actually. It's been with me since 2016 and I'm still using it today. So yeah. But the cons are, they can be hard on your brushes because sometimes you might be rubbing your brush on it hardly, and it might ruin the bristles. And it can be difficult to paint larger areas because unlike tubes where you can squeeze out a lot of paint, the space on a pan is limited and it might take real effort to rub out that much amount of color. So either pans or tubes, both has their own perks, and which one is better to use will be up to your own personal choice. Watercolor brushes come in many sizes, many types too. This round brush, they can produce both fine lines and broad washes. Then we got this flat brush. Flat brushes are good for drawing blocks. There's also a mop brush for large washes. For smaller details, you can use a rigger brush or a detail brush. The materials also vary. Neutral brushes are made of real hair. They can be sable hair, squirrel hair, ox hair, and others. They are softer, can hold more water, and have a long-lasting shape, which is why they're more expensive. A more budget-friendly alternative will be synthetic brushes. They're usually made of nylon or polyester. They have almost the same characteristic with neutral brushes, but might not be able to absorb as much pigment and water. For you guys that travel a lot, a water brush might be suitable for you. They have a part for storing water that you can refill, and usually they got a pointed tip. You can bring this brush wherever you go, especially for places where you can't get paint water. To use them, just simply squeeze the water part and then you can start painting. A palette is something you use to store paint and mix colors. There's a variety of materials and shapes. They can be plastic, porcelain, or metal. Deciding on which one to use will depend on how you like to paint. Some can be super large, with many wells for storing your paints. These are great for painting at home. Some can also have covers and are travel sized, if you like to paint in different places. You can even DIY your own palette by using any container or lid. Papers are one of the most important things to consider. When working with watercolors, you're most likely going to build lots of layers. Regular printer or sketchbook paper might not be able to hold that much water and paint. It might cause the paper to curl, and you can't really do too many things there. Too wet and it might even tear. Watercolor papers allow you to experiment more with your painting and build your layers freely because they are more thicker and can hold more water without curling or tearing apart. Watercolor papers come in 3 different surfaces. They are rough, hot press, and cold press. Rough surfaces have great textures. It's nice for loose paintings. Hot press types are nice and smooth. It's suitable for details. Cold press are in between and slightly textured. The weights also vary. The heavier the paper, the better it can take water and the more it costs. These are the 3 standard weights. To 90 pounds or 190 grams per square meter type can take less water. It's the most inexpensive and suitable for more sketch practice type of work. The 140 pounds or the 300 grams per square meter type is most commonly used. They can handle quite a lot of work, and when you're working with lots of water, you can tape it down or stretch it. The 300 pound or the 600 grams per square meter type is the strongest. It's almost like a board. They can handle heavy water and paint and also cost more than the other 2. Sometimes just changing your type of paper can cause a really big difference on your painting result. That is why choosing a good watercolor paper might be really crucial. Now that we've talked about all the important tools, it's time to start painting. Sometimes you might want to make a sketch first before you start painting. For sketch, I would recommend using a H pencil. These are low graphite pencil. They're definitely thinner than regular 2Bs. These will be suitable for underlying sketch so that your paint won't get messy. You're gonna need 2 jars of paint water. One is for cleaning your brush from previous paints and one for damping your brush to start with a new color. Using 2 jars of water will make sure that the colors that you put on paper will remain clear, clean, and new. There are a few techniques in watercolor. We're gonna talk about some of them. The first one is wet on wet. Basically, it's wet paint on wet paper. This is good for painting large areas, backgrounds, or gradients because for gradient you need wet paints for the colors to blend smoothly. The second technique is wet on dry. Wet paint on dry paper. Before we get to this, I want to talk about layers. So in watercolors, you need to remember to always work in layers. For example, you want to draw this landscape over here. So first thing first, you're gonna draw the background, right? The blue sky background, that's your first layer. And then you wanna add some mountains in front of it. You might want to use the wet on dry technique. So you wait for the first layer to dry and then you add the mountains. Because if you add it immediately when the first layer is still a bit wet, you might cause what is called as the cauliflower effect. The wet mountain is gonna blur on the wet sky and everything's gonna blend and everything's gonna bleed and it's not gonna look really good. I'm not sure that's what you want it to look like. So you gotta wait for the previous layer, the background layer to dry first and then you add wet paint on the dry paper. The last technique is a dry on dry. Not so wet paint on a dry paper. This is usually used for painting textures. So if you use more water, the more the paint bleeds on the paper, less control, transparent color. If you use less water, it means less bleeding. You can have more control and the color is going to turn out more opaque. The first one is a tissue. Tissues can be used to absorb excess water or to erase any mistakes before the paper absorbs it. If you don't want to waste tissues, you can always use a clean cloth. A drawing pen or a fine liner. These can be used to outline, sketch, or drawing details. Make sure that it's waterproof or it has pigment ink written on it, because if not, the ink is going to blabber all around and you don't want that. Color pencils can be used to add details or blend colors. Color pencils are easier to control than brushes, so it is good to add intense details without risking to ruin your painting. white gouache, or white acrylic, or white gel pen, or white color pencil. These tools can be used to add details, highlights, and even cover leak paints. And if you want to make a splatter effect, like when you want to draw lots of stars, you can use white paint with the help of a brush, preferably an older one, or a toothbrush, anything that can be used to sprinkle your paint. Well, that's basically it, Gabby's ultimate guide to watercolors for beginners. I hope that has been informative and enjoyable. And if you want to learn more about watercolors, I definitely recommend you guys to check out Makashino, Carlos Loops, Christy Partridge Art, Draw with Shiba, and the book Watercolor 365 by Leslie Redhead, and also a number of other online resources out there. Thank you guys for sticking around. If you want to start painting, remember to always count on God, try not to compare yourself with other artists, and be patient when you practice because you're likely going to face a lot of trials and errors, which is okay. You're actually adding points to your level bar. For more painting videos, you can check out these. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you guys with other art-related content next time. Bye!